Thank you very much, Juliet. Well, Mick Clifford, the writer from the Irish Examiner and the Sunday Times, is with us, as is Tony Williams, who is a solicitor from McAleese & Co., who specialises in media law. And they're with us to discuss the fallout from the Moriarty Tribunal report and also the reaction of Denis O'Brien and of Michael Lowry to that report. Mick, I think it's fair to say that Michael Lowry's reaction has been both vociferous and aggressive.
Absolutely, Anton, as has Denis O'Brien's, as has Ben Dunn's, who were the three principals who you come out worst out of the report. All of them rejected completely. Some of the statements from Denis O'Brien in particular about the judge, the chairman of the tribunal, Michael Moriarty, are particularly vociferous. And Michael Lowry came out today. Initially he gave an interview to his local radio station. He spoke later on national radio, and he says he rejects it completely. He says it's a fiction, and that he is considering legal action about the whole thing. I suppose on one level, when you consider the history of this tribunal, when you consider all that has gone on between the parties over the last 10 years, there should be no surprise at the reaction, really.
Well, I should give the usual vested interest declaration that Denis O'Brien's Communicorp does on this station. But the reaction of O'Brien and of Lowry, have we ever seen a time, Mick Clifford, when somebody has come out of a tribunal which has found them culpable for something and they've said, actually, you know what, that judge, he did a great job?
Of course we haven't, no, Anton, but the volume of protest, the extent of it, in this case, from what I can remember, would certainly differ from previous cases. I mean, for example, you have situations like Ray Burke in the Planning Tribunal. There was minor... there was nothing really in the Beef Tribunal. In the McCracken Tribunal, again, you had Michael Lowry and Charlie Haughey. All of them, of course, reject the findings, but I think there has been nothing on the level that you have here. Of course, also, it should be said that while the tribunal was going on, there was nothing like the challenges, the battle, what you might call in the media, between the various parties and the tribunal, etc. There was nothing like that in any other tribunal either. So it is fairly unique in that regard.
Mick, those battles that that queried the work of the tribunal, one of the things that happened with Frank Dunlop was that he was told that the costs of the tribunal could be levied against him, and there's a certain theory that says that was an incentive for him to talk a lot. Is there a likelihood that costs, do you think, will be levied against any of the key players, and particularly in the instance of Michael Lowry, will he be able to bear those kind of costs if that does happen?
Well, if Michael Lowry had to... towards the end of the tribunal, first of all, Michael Lowry had stopped retaining counsel on the basis that he couldn't afford to pay them. Whereas normally in a situation like this, theoretically, lawyers will appear on the basis they're going to get their costs at the end of it. The tribunals of the last 10 years have developed to the extent that an awful lot of lawyers won't do that, quite understandably. They want some money up front. On that basis, Lowry had refrained from having a lawyer represent him for the last few years. Having said that, overall, if he had to pay for his own costs, and theoretically again, what is quite possible is that some of the tribunal's costs would be laid at his door. I wouldn't think there's any way he'd be able to do that. Others, like Denis O'Brien, quite obviously could. However, again, we've seen elsewhere that in terms of the issue of costs, that most likely will go on for years and will undoubtedly be the subject of a number of trips down to the forecourts.
Given that the list of tribunals that you gave us, from Beef to Flood to Moriarty, they do overlap with all political parties. Political reaction has been somewhat muted, but this is what Micheál Martin, the Fianna Fáil leader, had to say in reaction to the publication of the report.
It's a profoundly disturbing report. Yet the principal response from government has been to publicly give no comment, while privately briefing that it's only really relevant to the actions of one man. This government is made up of people, as we know, who have spent years and made careers out of jumping to their feet on this House, demanding urgent responses on real and imagined transgressions far less serious than the matters dealt with by Judge Moriarty.
That's the Fianna Fáil leader, Micheál Martin. The Fine Gael leader in Taoiseach, Enda Kenny, also gave his reaction, and it was like this.
I've read the key points of this report. It is a serious report. It makes particular recommendations. So, in consideration of those key reports, I have asked the Minister for Communications to refer the report to the DPP and to the Garda Commissioner for their consideration. I've also asked the the whip of the Fine Gael party to make arrangements for a proper debate as early as possible next week.
Tony Williams, from a legal standpoint, passing on a 2,600-page tribunal report to the DPP, is there anything the DPP can do with it?
Well, he might use it as a doorstop or to prop up a table with a wobbly leg, but there's really nothing the DPP is going to do about this. The DPP acts on the basis of reports that are brought to him by proper investigative authorities of a criminal nature. You're talking about, Director of Corporate Enforcement or the Guards. It has also been sent to the Guards. It's far more important that has happened. The Guards are going to read through it. They're going to have a look and say, is there anything here that looks like it might be a criminal offence? Is there anybody here who looks like they could be a witness? They'll start all over again, but this is a hell of a roadmap. It's a 2,000-page long roadmap.
When you say roadmap, as I understand it, anything that lies within that report is inadmissible in its current form. They can't simply say, you said this in the tribunal, we're coming around with handcuffs.
That's absolutely correct, Anton. You can't just go into court, slap it on a table and say, here you are, Judge, what do you think? This information has been put before the tribunal. In certain circumstances, people have not had the same kind of legal protections and safeguards as if they were being interrogated by Gardaí in a criminal situation. But it's plain as the nose in your face from this that potentially criminal activities may have taken place, perhaps back in the 1990s, perhaps more recently. I mean, obstructing and hindering a tribunal is an offence in itself.
But, well, apart from the obstruction of the tribunal, the material within the report, where you say that they wouldn't have the same protections as they would in a Garda investigation, in some cases they have been compelled to provide evidence that if the Guards were investigating, they wouldn't have to. Is that right?
They simply wouldn't have those safeguards in a tribunal situation. And to be fair to Dennis O'Brien, as he correctly points out, the standard of proof is very different. In a tribunal situation, it is the opinion of a judge. That's the way these things work. We bring in somebody reputable, whose opinion we trust, and go for his opinion. In a criminal situation, as all your listeners will know, it's proof beyond all reasonable doubt. Just because the judge has said in this report that in his opinion certain things are so, is by no means the same as saying that in a criminal situation a court would find it to be so.
From the perspective of a criminal investigation, you having looked through the report, is there enough in it currently in the form of causality? Is there enough to say that got moved across to that account and therefore this thing happened for the Guards to be able to move?
There are two separate issues in the report, and to be fair to Judge Moriarty, he has stuck admirably to the terms of reference. Firstly, was money transferred from a person to a politician? It's the payments to politicians inquiry, after all, and he says, in his opinion, yes, payments were routed through labyrinthine methods to a politician. He finds that there are reasonable inferences that this was in connection with the carrying out of Minister Lowry's ministerial duties, as in the granting of the licence. Now, if that were brought forward to a court on the criminal standard of proof, well, you're into criminal behaviour then. But as Mr. O'Brien has said in his interviews today and yesterday, he would welcome the opportunity for this to be challenged in the criminal court. He doesn't think it will stand up on that proof.
Ben Dunn also said on radio very clearly that he was eager for the DPP to seek to attempt to prosecute because he didn't believe such prosecution could be achieved. Is it possible for, in that kind of context, the DPP to say to somebody like Ben Dunn, well, OK, in that case, waive the rights that apply to you by virtue of this being a tribunal process and put it all into our domain?
Well, I think if bluffs were called like that, I think you'd suddenly find Ben Dunn saying, well, I'm afraid I have to defer to the advices of my learned lawyers here.
Mick Clifford, the other thing that is happening at the same time as the file is being passed on to the DPP, there is proposal that there would be, the whips are being called together, I think in about 20 minutes, to decide on a debate in the Dáil about this. Will a debate in the Dáil achieve anything?
Well, I suppose, put it this way, after 14 years, Anton, it's incumbent on the Dáil to debate it one way or the other. I don't think there's any way of avoiding that, considering the costs, etc., everything. Will it achieve anything? I don't really think so. I mean, the only thing that politically can be achieved out of this, and the huge question is whether there's the political will to do it or not, are the recommendations that Judge Moriarty made in his report, particularly in relation to things like political funding. Now, if the government, the opposition, the Oireachtas as a whole, is anyway serious about this report, they would need to implement those recommendations speedily. I suspect they won't do that because the recommendations are similar to ones that have come out of other reports. They suggest that all contributions to parties and to individual politicians should be published, that there should be complete transparency about it all. We haven't seen that yet. I see no reason to believe that we will, and until such time as we do, you're going to continue to have suspicion around the interface of business and politics, because that's what landed us with this long-running tribunal and others as well.
Well, briefly, Mick, then, does that mean that in a way this could actually be doing more harm than it does good? In other words, if people see the outcome of this report, believe that there is something that should be acted on, and nothing happens, it shakes confidence rather than building confidence?
Well, yes, and that's what's happened in other cases as well. And I think we've seen it again and again. I mean, for instance, the whole area of money in politics has changed since this tribunal was established. However, it has changed in such a way that it leaves plenty of loopholes open for politics to be funded in ways that are not transparent. Now, in the majority, if not the vast majority of those cases, there is no corruption as we know it going on. However, what is going on is there's relationships there between business and politics which the rest of us don't know about, and therefore when it comes to implementing laws that affect business or others, we don't know whether politicians are minded to be cognizant of money that was given to parties, for instance. Officially that's not corruption, but I certainly think it adds to cynicism about the whole body politic.
That's Mick Clifford, who writes for the Irish Examiner and for the Sunday Times, and before him was Tony Williams, who is a solicitor with McAleese & Co and also running for Senate. Time for the traffic now with